welcome to Poetry.LA, and thank you for being basically my first official guest in hosting. I'm really happy about this. Not everybody who's going to be watching does know how amazing you are, but if you can just give us a little bit about yourself, that'd be awesome.
I'm Bridgette Bianca, poet and professor from South Central Los Angeles, you know the tagline, author of Be Trouble, which is my first book. Hopefully not my only book, but we're going to see what happens. And I've been in the poet professor game for going on 15 years now, and when it comes to being a poet, I've always been a poet, but like, I think 2017, which is probably when I met you actually, at a reading.
Yes.
And it's been off to the races. You've been there you were there from the very first reading until today. That is quite poetic, actually.
And also, sorry, what university did you go to? You went to a little well-known university. Can you just tell us what university did you, sorry, it's a little one that not a lot of people know about.
I mean,
Go ahead.
Got to make sure. I mean, there's some, pretty popular alumni, but, me included. I went to the illustrious Howard University, the real HU, the Mecca, the hilltop, the capstone, the greatest university in the land, and the best HBCU in the world. No shade to the others, though, They're cool too, but it's called the Mecca for a reason.
Right. That's why I feel like it has to be in your bio. Like, that's one of the things I definitively know about you as well. Like, that you went to Howard. There's no way that anyone can doubt you went to Howard. That's why I was like, you have to. That has to be part of the bio.
I pretty much found Howard and poetry at like the same time. So I was in middle school. I was trying to write short stories. It wasn't working. But also, I was in middle school, so I was writing the sappiest love stories ever, and I wasn't in love. And then I started working in our campus library, and I found poetry, poetry found me. So I started reading poetry more often, trying to write it, not writing good poetry, but still writing something. And at the same time, I heard about Howard University, like in a really intense way for the first time.
You were writing short stories first before you started writing poetry, which again, I totally relate to, because I actually also started writing short stories when I was in 7th grade. And that's how I started getting into writing, like really bad short stories after reading Babysitter's Club a lot.
Same.
Babysitter's Club,
oh, gosh.
Right? Okay. So, but you said that you then started reading poetry, right? So who were some of the people that you were first introduced to?
I was reading poetry, academically, as you do. And obviously I loved like Langston Hughes, Nikki Giovanni. I was really big on the Harlem Renaissance because that was the only poetry that they showed us that had black poets in it. So obviously that's where I gravitated. Working in the library, I made it a point to read every book we had in the poetry section, because what else am I going to do for an hour every day? And I remember coming across this book of poetry. Well, it's probably the newest book we had, honestly, of poetry, besides Maya Angelou. And it was a young girl, 15. She was from Harlem. The year was 1975. In some special program in Harlem, they were publishing books from like the writers community there. Kind of like what the World Stage does through CLI, right? And so she's 15, she's writing this book of poetry, and I'm like, okay, she's a teenager, I'm a kid, like, okay, I like this. There's other kids in the poetry section, so all right. And I connected so much to her work. I mean, this is Harlem 1975. We're having two very distinct experiences in South Central LA. But it felt like she was writing about a world that people like turn from. And like, well, we don't want to talk about that part of it. We'll talk about like the good Harlem from the Harlem Renaissance, not 1975 heroin, not businesses shutting down and people going bankrupt, and not about the migration of people, not about landlords, not about pissy hallways, not about this. And I'm like, but no, I want to read about that, because that is actually what it's like to be here and to have folks turn away from South Central in that way. Don't talk about gang violence, don't talk about drugs, don't talk about the street, and also don't talk about the good stuff either. Don't make it sound good to live here. It should just be people's nightmares.
Do you remember the name of the poet by any chance?
Yes, Vanessa Howard, and the book was A Screaming Whisper, right? So reading her book, and I don't know where she ended up, but I know she birthed a poet out of me. She was telling the kind of stories, like I said, people do not want to hear the vastness of a space like Harlem in 1975 or South Central LA in the 2000s. They don't want to know that you actually, go to basketball games, that you hang out with your family, that you have barbecues, that you listen to gangster rap, but you also still might love gospel on Sundays. Like, no one wants you to be dynamic.
Right.
You have to be one thing. And I think being a poet let me be more dynamic as like a studious kid. Like, I'm getting all the straight A's, but I also write like this revolutionary poetry on the side. I went from love stories to revolutionary poetry, which I think we all do.
We can go back and forth.
Yeah,
they can happen. We can. All those things can exist together.
Yeah. I mean, right now I read all these romance novels because I don't write romance, and if you only read what I write, you're gonna be really sad. So let me get the romance in there too, you know? Like, you gotta have both. I'll be really sad. You know, I can write about the revolution and also, you know, read a little smut on the side. That's okay.
Yeah, there's romance in revolution, and there's smut in revolution, okay?
Gotta have a little love.
There's a whole lot of love in revolution. You know, some revolutionaries were
very loving.
Very loving. I was trying to remember again, when was the first time I met you? And it was Art Share. Doug he had been hosting Say Her Name series, and it was for Sandra Bland, commemorating Sandra Bland, and all women who have unfortunately died under, you know, because of police brutality. Or in the hands of the police. And that was the first time. I remember taking all my children, and you came on the stage, which was just like the space, and you captivated all of us, right? I mean, the kids were very young at the time, and I remember I had to tell them to put away their devices and stuff like that, or mute the devices. And I remember distinctly they did that, but then they leaned in when you specifically started to read poetry. And I did as well, and I just was like, who is that? Who is that? Who is she? And I remember coming up to you afterwards and complimenting you on your dress.
That was my third ever time reading poetry out loud in like years.
Never.
Third ever time, okay? And it was just for us, the Sandra Bland readings. And it's because Doug was like, okay, yeah, come to this one, come to this one. Rocio Carlos is the person who, you know, pulled me into it. She was my classmate at Otis, and she was active in the scene. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really go to poetry readings. I don't really read how people read poetry. So I don't know if it's going to fit, right? Because I'm me, right? So I'm louder, and I'm bigger, and I'm all the things. And I've been going to these quiet poetry readings for the MFA, very delicate, you know, things. And so she invited me out, and I read literally face in paper, like down, I am not looking up. Here is the poem. I read it. I stepped away. I sat down, and then it's over. Like, I was just trying to get through it, and then Doug was like, oh, that was really great. I met Chiwan there, who ended up being my publisher. I mean, and everyone was like, no, come back again. So I came back again. The third time was that July. I felt so at home. Like, that was the day where I realized, oh, I can really do this. And not that it's just this audience, but it's like I could do this anywhere. I grew quickly in like 6 months. I just grew as a poet. I grew as a performer. I had 7 poems. So I didn't have a book. I didn't have any like practice. Like, no, this is just, I write this way, I speak this way, and here I'm in front of you, and people responded. And I got bookings after that, and it's been this, like, ever since, like, literally from that reading. So many folks are like, yeah, I saw you at Art Share, and you were really great. I didn't expect it. I didn't know who you were, and now I know who you are. And I'm, like, so honored.
And then this wonderful book came through, Be Trouble. Talk to me about the title. Let's talk about the cover. It's gorgeous. How did this come about?
So here's the issue. You get 2 titles that sound really great, right? And you're like, the book should be called Be. Right? And it should be just be, but also like in African American vernacular English, the habitual be, right? I be, we be, they be, and just how that functions in like the habitualness of living and experiencing and going through things. So I have a poem actually about that in the book called The Habitual Be. And then I thought, well, there's also like a little bit of trouble in here because people are used to me in my professional life and even in my personal life being, you know, a pretty mild-mannered person, not quick to anger, always very rational and reasonable and see all the sides. And that is who I am. Honestly, it is who I am. But I'm also a little troubled too. And I think the first time a person who knew me personally outside of poetry heard me read poetry, they're like, you're up there like, you're like a spark. Like, you're making me think about these things, and now I'm angry, and you make me sad, and I cried, and like we're having all these emotional moments. I'm like, yeah, there's trouble. So the B came from the habitual B. The trouble, that came from a couple of places. One, yes, the book is definitely causing some trouble. I mean, it is all the troubles. But also the song Troubles of the World, sung by Mahalia Jackson, that one in particular, it resonates for me. And as a matter of fact, I remember first hearing it while watching the 1950s version of Imitation of Life. With all the issues that film notwithstanding, that film was so impactful for me. Like, it has such a idea about race and about the world and about motherhood and bonding and whatever the case is. And I remember the funeral scene. Mahalia Jackson's in the movie and she sings this song. And it's it's one of the hardest scenes to ever watch, but I watch it every time. Like, I can't stop. Like, I watch the movie and I'm like, I'm kind of getting sleepy, but the scene's coming up and I'll just finish watching it. And then when I graduated from Howard University, what song did the choir sing in the rafters with a much faster tempo and not as sad and solemn? Troubles of the World. It's
so
like
perfect.
following me everywhere. And I'm like, okay, when I need to be kind of centered, I think about the lyrics, I think about what she's saying, how she sounds. So that song, and then also Bridge Over Troubled Water, Aretha Franklin, obviously, because I'm always calling myself a bridge, obviously, like in different spaces. It's like you have to be a bridge over the troubled water. And so I kind of hope Be Trouble is a bit of the trouble, but also a bit of the bridge, right? So yeah, things are hard, but there's also like joy and laughter that get you over.
Absolutely.
You know, how I got over through the bridge, right? The bridge got me over it. And sometimes you got to duck under the bridge too and see what's going on, right? But the bridge is there. So that's Be Trouble.
Can we hear There Goes the Neighborhood?
Oh, you know I love this one. I mean, I love all of them.
No, this is, so I think this is to me, you were talking earlier, and I do agree with whoever said that to you. You definitely, there's a ferocity about the way you read a poem. There's a ferocity about your work, but there's a gentleness at the same time that exists. And that's, every time I hear you read, I do get angry too. I get angry with you. But at the same time, I feel like your poems hold me. And the way you read the poem also, I feel like you're holding the audience. And you're taking us on this journey of anger, but it's almost like saying, it's okay to be angry, but I got you.
There goes the neighborhood. First, they came for our bodies, snatched my nose right off my face, then placed a forearm across my windpipe, clamped a sweaty palm over my mouth, and said the use of force was justified because I insisted on breathing. Maybe it started with the ships. First, they came for our bodies, laid us down like railroad ties, carved a path west on our backs, filled their coffers with gold and our bellies with God and other white men for us to fear. Maybe it started with the ships. First, they came for our bodies. My body looked out of place in that car. How could I afford it? It must be stolen. I was stolen. So they made me pay for it. My body looked out of place in that neighborhood when all along my body was out of place in this country. They uprooted and planted my body here because it was fertile and would yield more crops, cotton, rice, sugar, tobacco, independence from Britain, a more perfect union. Maybe it started with the ships. First, they came for our bodies. I cradled this economy and it nursed at my breast. It continues to reach under my clothing to be pacified and soothed. Never satisfied, this country throws tantrums because I won't bear it all for their profit, forgetting that prisoners cannot consent, and my refusal never stopped them from taking my body before. Maybe it started with the ships. First, they came for our bodies, then they came for this land. Maybe it started with music festivals, extravagant dioramas on stolen grounds where they cosplay in bejeweled bindis and dream catcher earrings and Buddha tattoos and kush and coronas and cocaine. Limbs flating like tattered flags that they dance to, rhythms they beat out of indigenous bodies in boarding schools, the audacity of stars and stripes draped over their shoulders and eagle feathers in their hair. Maybe it started with the ships. Maybe it started with a new boutique, with high prices and sparse racks. No layaway in their store policy, no habla español, no patience for poverty. New age vending machines looting bodegas. Fusion food trucks shaming sisters selling cocoa bread with butter and honey for the sin of gluten. The man selling oranges and cherries on the boulevard cannot compete with the new organic farmers market. Maybe it started with the ships. First, they came for our bodies, then they came for this land. Gave it a hashtag for a name. The New World. South Harlem became Soha. Spanish Harlem became Spaha. Columbia Heights, D.C. became Cohi. South Central Los Angeles became Sola. Over my dead body. Como se dice bullshit? These hipster hideaways, upper middle class settler colonies, bourgeois urban safaris. The ghetto has become a life hack. The homes we made in the barrel's bottom after white flight are now hashtag best kept secrets. And the blocks where black and brown boys learn to click, click, bang and get stuck become Plymouth Rocks for millennials wanting more bang for their buck. Maybe it started with the ships. This must be how the ancestors felt when they saw sails in the distance. The pilgrims have found us again, and this time they say they don't need our bodies, just the warm streets we leave behind.
Stop.
Thank you.
Stop.
That one always gets me so angry. That's why you picked it. I get angry in the middle. I'm like, pace yourself, Bridget. You're getting angry in the middle.
Oh, it's one of my favorites.
I'm so concerned, gentrification-wise. I'm so concerned
Right.
because the things that are just like annoying to me, what I've accepted as like a part of the character of South Central, will eventually be criminal. And that's everything from the loud sounds and music and the cars and the people and whatever the case is to me in the space. That'll be criminal eventually, right? Like me appearing here will be criminal. I'll be suspicious in a neighborhood that I've been in my whole life, a neighborhood that nobody else wanted, which is why There Goes the Neighborhood was so important to me, because I wanted to be honest that I recognize what is happening here. The turnover of people is a natural thing, but I recognize the abandonment of an area, leave it to nothing, let the people cultivate it and grow it up, and then come back and now reappropriate it as yours under the guise of like wanting to be in a cultural hub, which is what they regard all these places.
Right.
These are cultural hubs. I want to be near culture, but not the people.
So other than being a fabulous poet, you're a teacher. You also do, what I love about your Instagram presence, because we had to talk about that, right?
Yes.
That's one of the ways I keep up with your life is, so you also, you have a series called We Be Reading. You have Young, Black, and Tenured.
Yes.
So can you talk about that?
You know, it's tough being the only Black professor in a space. It's tough being the one of two, the one of three, you know, the second one in. It's tough. And when I first started at my current college as a tenure track professor, I didn't know any other tenure track professors just in my general life. We'd all been like hustling the adjunct life for years, whatever the case is. So I got to the college and I felt very isolated, to be honest. You know, there were 4 other Black full-time professors in my department. And we're a very large department. English department is always going to be really big. And I couldn't always see them visibly because we teach different schedules. That's the thing about being co-workers in education. You don't really work together. And so I felt very alone, but I wanted to talk about my experiences. So I took to my Instagram and I just started talking, which is generally how most things begin with me. I was like, okay, this is what it's like to be young, Black, and tenure track. Hey y'all, welcome back to Young, Black, and Tenure Track. It is midterm time, okay? That means you got students in your email right now begging you for another chance. Midterms can be really difficult for students because, first of all, they happen out of nowhere. It feels like it just happens out of nowhere. And so they find themselves shocked that they are missing assignments or that there's a test coming up or whatever it is. And so for the first 4 years of my tenure track, I was just talking about it. And then when things shifted with the pandemic, I'm like, it looks really different now, but I'm still in the tenure track. And I actually finished my tenure the first year of the pandemic, right? And so I kind of stopped making the videos because I thought, well, I guess we're all teaching from home now and it all kind of looks the same. But I'm like, no, but I'm having really unique experiences. Like my department went from having 4 Black people to having 9 Black people in the past couple of years. That's a big deal. And I think that my presence in talking about being a teacher to anyone who asks me, it could be a part of that, like across the board. Like I'm open to talk about being a professor to anybody. And so YBTT, as I call it, was like that chance to do that. I was able to get some other young Black women professors together. We had a talk for AWP, but it gave me a forum to talk about all the little stuff. And I thought also, when I look up professor, I don't see me. Right? I don't see anybody that looks like me, that talks like me, that acts like me, even though I see myself now in the classroom. So who else is looking? Someone else is also looking to wonder about this. And also just the idea of like, professors are very serious people. You know, they're, you know, patches on the elbows and they're, you know, the corduroy jackets and they have the briefcase and they're all, you know, spouting Shakespeare, whatever it is. So then here I go, you know, I think my last few videos, I had blue hair for YBTT, right? I'm a whole different person than what you expect. I sit down, it says 36-minute wait. So no, thank you. I stand up, I say, excuse me, do I have to wait 36 minutes to turn in some grade change forms? He says, oh, you're an instructor? I was standing in the instructor line and I said I was faculty. So what? So do I need to use more synonyms? And so I like the idea of letting people in on what it means to be a professor for me, what it looks like for me, that it also looks like me. And I wanted them to see this dynamic person who wasn't always sure. I wasn't always clear about what I was doing. I'm like, I'm teaching myself to be a professor every single day because this is very new. And then also, I am okay with being the person that you witness. Sometimes when we look at people's lives on social media, we're looking for the really curated, put together, I know what I'm doing, here's all my tips and tricks and how to get it done. And I'm on here like, look, y'all, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I've been grading essays for hours. My eyes are starting to cross. I'm exhausted. Like, just keep me up. I'll check in with you all again in an hour. And then I have folks in my DMs like, go to bed, get some sleep. Like, I needed that community because I couldn't necessarily access it in person. Now I'm just sharing all my gripes about equity and about the diversity and inclusion.
Right.
But it's also important because in those rooms, we are not necessarily always heard, or we're the people doing all the leading and not, the venting all the time or commiserating. So I'm doing a little bit of everything. Now, we be reading Wednesdays. That's a little different.
That's a shift. But I still tune in, even though I don't. It's interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's the good thing. So we be reading Wednesdays. I review romance novels, which is so separate from anything else that I talk about.
Romance and
there's
romance.
It's love and it's a little bit of something else as well. Okay, I don't discriminate across the. I'm reading some books now where I'm like, what is this?
Right.
But I just have to know. It's so interesting. So we be reading Wednesdays started 2020. The pandemic was, just really getting going. I'd lost my aunt to COVID-19. I was just in a state of depression, honestly, just incredibly sad. And then, summer 2020 was really big, Black Lives Matter. I was teaching African American literature at the time. And every week with my students, we're like having moments of like, let's just hold each other. I started second guessing the books I was teaching because here's all this trauma. You're already experiencing trauma. There was so much stuff going on. There was so much pressure. And a friend of mine, Tamala, who's also a writer, was like, so you think you like romance because it like shows you like happy endings, like not just those happy endings, but like just people ending happily? And I was like, yeah, I think you're right. Because I started picking them up again. I was like, I think that might be why I'm gravitating to them. So then after that, I was like, and maybe I should just be immersed in love and happiness and joy and silly things that aren't really very important maybe in the long run, but that can make a relationship. And as a sociology minor at Howard University, I love thinking about how people think and how they come together. And so I wasn't just reading romance thinking, oh, this is a cute story. The guy loves the girl. They go on a date. Like, no, I was really getting into the weeds. All right, so one of my favorite segments for We Be Reading Wednesdays is called That Good Race Shit. Because all these books, I'm reading a lot of Black books, yes, but also other books too. And I was interested in how they confronted race. So obviously, I'm a literature professor. I teach African American literature, and so I think about post-colonial theory and African American theory and feminist theory. Like, I have all those in my brain. I can't turn them off because it's a romance novel and they're clinched on the cover. Like, I still think about it. And so I want to talk about that stuff. And my friends are like, okay, we get it. Another romance novel, and you're upset because the guy doesn't respect the girl's like opinion about whatever. Okay, and I'm like, who can I talk to about this? The internet. So let's start recording videos in our car outside of Target. You're right. I would go to Wendy's, park in front of Target, and record the videos. And suddenly, I found another community of people. Welcome back to We Be Reading Wednesdays. I'm your girl, BB. I'm not a book reviewer, but I do talk a lot. And today, we're talking about Like I Want You by Shantae. Let's get into it. So this story opens up with heartbreak, okay? And honestly, in my opinion, it should have opened with bloodshed. And then suddenly I found all these folks, not even mostly women, honestly, like a lot of men as well, who were also at the same time starting to read romance too, like in a really intense way, because we were all looking for something. And I remember I did an interview and I said to them, I said, yeah, I read romance so that I can write what I write. Because I'm still really angry. Like, I don't stop being angry. It doesn't like block the reality out. It's just that I need a moment where my brain can like step away from that and like comfort and relax and heal and rest. And I really went into it intensely. So that first year I read about 200.
Wow.
The next year I read maybe a little bit over 200. Right now I'm at like 93.
Wow.
Only because I'm reading new books to teach. So I'm like balancing, but I'm a fast reader.
And you do audiobooks too.
I do audiobooks
and you
too.
do audiobooks, that's just to be fair.
I like to cover all the bases.
Right.
And so I think what it's done for me is it really let me think about reading outside of poetry. I don't review poetry books. I always tell folks, I'm like, I'm not going to trash talk my poet friends. I'm sorry. They're all wonderful. Read their books. Judge for yourself. I teach literature in a classroom. Enroll. It's $46 per credit. Come on and join me, right? But for romance, it's like I can allow this to just be selfishly a thing that I enjoy.
Yeah.
And it's not of service. It's of service to me and my humanity. It's keeping me going. But it's of service to no one else. The college can't claim it. The poetry world can't claim it. I'm not writing. I went to a reading once and they're like, we know you love romance novels. Can you give us a romantic poem? And I was like,
No.
I'm not that girl. I'm not that girl. I'm the be trouble girl, not the be lover girl.
To wrap up our conversation, because I didn't feel like it was like an interview, I would love for you to please read An Exasperated Black Woman Said, Fuck It, I'll Do It. And I chose it because I completely empathize with that as a mom, as a woman of color in this world, as a teacher. Yes, how many times I've said, fine, I'll do it.
Too many times. Me too. An exasperated Black woman said, fuck it, I'll do it. It is fall. I have recently buried a loved one. It is the morning after the election. You are disheveled and teary. You assume the pain in my eyes is yours. You hug me, a stranger. You say, it's so good to talk to someone who understands. I don't remember speaking. I don't remember your face, stranger. Later, I only realize I'm crying by the look on my students' faces. This is not a poem. It is still fall. Someone drove past my window and shouted, fucking niggers, and only I seem to hear. It is a few days after the election. You come to me for confession. You are mad at yourself for being so naive. I tell you the word nigger is a threat to my safety. You are late and have to go, and I am alone again. This is my life. It is spring. I have buried another loved one. I feel faint after yawning. It is months after the election. You are growing angrier every day. You ask me if I feel the same. I'd been invisible, but now I was useful. So I say, I am a Black woman, and I am invisible again. This is not a poem. It is almost summer. You blurt out, ever since the election, you wake up wanting to kill yourself. And you laugh. This is my life. It is fall. 194 Black people have been shot and killed by the police, 73 more than the last time I read this. What will that number be by winter? This is not a poem. I had a student whose father, Terry, was shot in the head while lying face down with his hands cuffed behind his back. The police pursued him because he didn't have the proper reflective lights on his bicycle. This is my life. You may have noticed that I like to use my hands when I speak. This can be seen as aggressive, and I might frighten you into killing me. This is not a poem. Do you understand how taboo it is for Black women like me to go to therapy? Because we are supposed to be strong for everyone. This is my life. I am sorry that you only realized the world was fucked up when your sisters voted with their white skin and not their pink pussies. This is not a poem. While you vomit angst into my lap, forgive me for not holding back your hair in solidarity. This is my life, so I'm a little busy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Like, really, thank you. I appreciate you.
My goodness. It gets me every time. It gets me every time.